Blog Talk Radio.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. It is December 2nd, 2015. This is your host, Andrew Fisher, normally broadcasting Wednesdays from the suburbs of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to expose the true and false nature of reality for what it is and what it isn't. Show airs from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays normally. And today we have Jonathan Mozenter, or Mozenter. I'm going to have to ask him when he comes on how his last name is actually pronounced, whether it's a long or a short O there between the M and the Z. But first of all, I believe this is him in the queue. I just see one number in the queue, area code 617. I'm going to assume that that's probably him. And Jonathan, I will let you on the air no later at 10 after the hour. By the way, I hope people aren't having trouble finding the show. I misspelled, as Jonathan told me earlier, that I misspelled consciousness in the title of this video, higher consciousness and the pathway to positive change. And that would have caused a change in the URL for this video when I changed that. So hopefully people will be able to find this. But anyway, I do archive all my interviews on YouTube. So even the people that can't listen live will be able to listen archive. So Jonathan Mozenter, I believe it was at the Philadelphia Free Your Mind conference that I met him. He runs modelingtheway.com, which is a video blog that educates people on the process of change. It takes an integrated look at all aspects of change, including psychology, behavior, culture, and systems and the interplay between them. It also explores how individuals, groups, organizations, and society all change. The material includes models and steps people can use to cause positive change in their lives. Videos cover theory and real world application. Well, I noticed that a lot of his videos don't seem to be there at the moment. So when I asked Jonathan when he comes on, what's the deal with the videos on that website not being there, he could explain that. Since I mentioned that, if you folks will just give me a second here so I can type the website in the URL on my, here it is. All right, so I'll get Jonathan on no later than 10 after the hour. First, though, the news courtesy of Alex Jones and Company at InfoWars. First of all, I want to point out Donald Trump. He did have a interview on the Alex Jones show. I think it would have been today when he had that exposed. It says in the video info here that he exposes a lot of the corruption and evil doings on the part of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. Of course, you'd have to take that with a grain of salt when he talks about that, because he is obviously of the opposite party. And even though the Demo Crips and Bloodlickens, as Jesse Ventura called them in his book, are always duking it out with each other like gangs, they are in the end controlled by the same special interests. So, well, the thing is, it's kind of strange with Donald Trump. I mean, he does seem to be on the American way side in some ways, considering that Jesse the Body Ventura, who did, by the way, a conspiracy theory show that woke up a lot of people in 2009 and 2010, he did say he would be Donald Trump's running mate in an interview on some mainstream news interview. And, well, he said he just disagreed with a few things that Donald Trump says, but he would not mind being his running mate. He's sure that they could somewhat get along with that if they were to be president and vice president. But Donald Trump, some say he would be a bad president simply because he's very wealthy and all. But Donald Trump does seem to, in some ways, be having a little bit of an angel appearing around him instead of the devil appearing around him. Because some of the things he's doing that caused Jesse Ventura to want to say, I'll be his running mate. I mean, maybe he's having a change of heart, like Pennsylvania Governor Tom Ridge, when he was elected the head of the Department of Homeland Security after 9/11. He was very tyrannical at first, but then he had a change of heart when he realized this is all about tyranny and it's hurting the American people. And he's sort of been a little bit of a whistleblower since then. Pennsylvania former Governor Tom Ridge has. And, well, maybe the same is true with Donald Trump, but there's a lot of people, including Mr. Cat Eye, who's decoding videos I often watch on YouTube. He says Donald Trump would be no better or worse than Hillary Clinton. So I'll make of that whatever you will. But anyway, enough of that. You guys are free to listen to that interview if you want. But other news here. Hillary invokes 9/11 again to defend ties to Wall Street. Okay, I did listen to this listen to what Hillary said. Actually, it was Jakari Jackson, InfoWars reporter, who did the video about this. And I don't think they played Hillary Clinton in it, but her voice actually. But he did say that Hillary invoked 9/11, and it seemed to be in a context that was just throwing it up there when it seemed to have no connection. It was to defend ties to Wall Street, and so she just arbitrarily mentioned 9/11 to get people to side with her. But then again, so many people are realizing 9/11 was a fraud. Is she really that stupid enough to think that, well, or does she believe, or is she not being stupid? Is she maybe right that most people would side with her simply because she mentioned 9/11? Are people going to be like sheep, or are they going to not be sheep and realize, okay, it was all a fraud, it was all an inside job? We know Hillary is obviously a tyrant because she tries to invoke 9/11 to get people to side with her, and only a tyrant would do that. Well, I always mention this, and I'll never stop mentioning this, and I'll definitely mention it a lot more if Hillary becomes president. I hope that never happens. But David Icke's Revelations of the Mother Goddess documentary in 1998, Arizona Wilder, former mind-controlled slave of the Illuminati, had her programming in her brain unwired. But she was still able to remember a lot of things that happened when she was under mind control at satanic ceremonies, where she got to see political and corporate leaders shapeshift into human and ET reptilian form. And she did say, I saw Hillary Clinton before I knew she was Hillary Clinton. Make of that whatever you will. But anyway, next article, the truth behind why Americans aren't ready for Syrian refugees. Now this issue, it's kind of hard to deal with something like this because, well, I've seen a lot of petitions. I get a lot of petitions in my email about this one issue on opposite ends. A lot of people that say not letting in Syrian refugees is un-American. We should not treat people differently because they are from another country. Let them immigrate to this country without a process. And I have often said that I would love to see the day where people could immigrate into other countries and not have to go through any sort of an immigration process or have to go through an Ellis Island type procedure if they dock their ships into the ports of the other country. And everybody could just travel freely across international borders without any government permission or paperwork filing. That would be great if we could do that. However, because there is a plot, a conspiracy among the powers that be to bring refugees and illegal immigrants into countries in order to impoverish the country and take our jobs and all the other bad things, then it is in our best interest to ask people that immigrate into this country to go through some sort of a process. And on the related note, it's a good idea to secure the borders and force people to go through some sort of a process when they go across that border. Now, what should that process be? Well, to be honest with you, I'm really not an expert on immigration law and how it currently is. But if you could have a process that does not involve invoking rights, like ask people to be searched without a warrant when they cross the border. I mean, that's got to be the way it is. And I mean, that's one area the courts have not been our side. They say you don't have any rights at the border, especially in regards to being searched without a warrant. And it seems like a stepping stone procedure that case was to get it, to acclimate us into giving up all our rights, regardless of whether or not at the border. Rights are inalienable. Doesn't matter where you're from. They are creator granted and not constitution granted. But anyway, done with that. Next article, San Bernardino shooting, highly suspicious. I'm going to quickly check into that. Another window here. One more story up here. Just says Islamic militant compounds discovered. Yeah, probably from Islamicists, from ISIS people who were able to immigrate into this country because the government that controls ISIS let them in. But this shooting that happened in San Bernardino, I just want to get a few things out of here. Reports indicate that there were 3 shooters in tactical gear. The suspects escaped moments after the shooting in a black SUV. The shooting does not appear to be the work of a disgruntled employee. So far, there is no motive, and the shooting makes no sense. Several days before the shooting, there was an active shooter drill held in neighboring Victorville, California. Oh, the drill, yeah. Dead giveaway. It was a staged event. Next article, police are releasing very little information about the shooting, victims, possible suspects, and other details. A shooting at a facility for people with developmental disabilities will undoubtedly result in widespread outrage, as did the alleged shooting at Sandy Hook. And like Sandy Hook, the shooting in California will feed into a demand for so-called gun control measures. If we lose the Second Amendment right to bear arms, we lose everything else, because the founding fathers put that in the Constitution so we could defend ourselves from tyrannical government. So the shooting occurred hours after House Republicans blocked debate on a bill to prevent people on the government's no-fly list from exercising their Second Amendment rights. Perfect timing. There are unconfirmed reports the shooting was carried out by at least one Middle Eastern male, a rumor that feeds into the domestic terror and ISIS narrative. All right, just want to quickly get that out for all the you conspiracy theorists out there, but enough of that. Let's get Jonathan Mozenter on the air. I believe this is him. Area code 617. You are on the air. It's John Mozenter.
Hey, Andrew. Yes, it is. It's Jonathan. How are you doing, man? Thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here.
Glad to have you on. How is your last name pronounced? Is it Mozenter or Mozenter?
It's Mozenter.
Long O between the M and the Z. Okay. Thank
You
for
got it, man.
clarifying. You have no idea how
Yeah,
many
no
times I've
problem.
had guests on where I've had to ask them to, how do you pronounce your name when I have them on? And a lot of
Yeah.
fancy names
A
out
lot
there
of people
happen.
have that. I don't know, something about the Z or something, but people have trouble with that name. Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, first of all, I was a little confused when I looked at your site. I see a lot of videos are not there. Are they being deleted against your will or something? Or is there
No,
some
no, no,
reason?
no, no. I'm in the process of kind of redoing them. I'm gonna repost them in the near future. But yeah, just I had kind of upgraded my skills in video production, and they're just getting reformatted. So there'll be a lot more stuff coming in 2016.
Good to know. 2016 definitely will be a year of a lot of change in many ways, and see that you focus on the process of change. Well, that's obviously a very broad term. And of course, a lot of people that hear the word change would instantly do a face palm or a double face palm and say, we've been down this road before. Don't even get me started with Barack Obama back in 2008 and all this talking about change till you're deaf in the ear and all the rest of it. And it was all an illusion, all a scam. And so simply the word change in this day and age, if you put that word out, like I am about making change, a lot of people that see through the illusion now are instantly going to be skeptical. Change is a very controversial word, but I guess the best way to start off this interview is to ask you why this subject, why change? What is it about change? And feel free to elaborate. You got the floor on this. I'll have specific questions for you later on the interview, but why change of all the things that you could focus in your life on?
Yeah, that's a great place to start, Andrew. Yeah, so for me, change has always been a huge part of my life. I guess it started back from having parents who are social workers, and they help people change. So I grew up with it, and I kind of grew up learning about, seeing the world through more of a psychologist's worldview, and I realized how important that information is, and that anyone could benefit from that. And as your audience knows, with the high levels of social engineering and mind control that's going on, that understanding how the mind works and how to get through the traps are certainly critical if we're going to sort of change our society. And that realization that I had some sort of uh, insights that most of the other people didn't have has happened now at least three major times that really inspires me into making this blog website about change. And we just covered the two other ones that are super significant. I mean, I think as your audience knows, about 5 years ago, I started looking into alternative media, alternative documentaries, and I started learning about the shadow government and false flags and the true nature of banking and lots of dark unveilings. Obviously not enough people know about this. So I'm certainly passionate in helping people see that. And then the other big thing that gets me really pumped about change is I started helping individuals change. And I also noticed that individuals operate within a bigger organizational or society kind of framework. And so I started to understand that if I really wanted to have really big change, I needed to understand how to change those large scale systems, organizations, groups. And so I started studying this field called organizational development, which is all about how you make groups and develop leaders. So I'm just constantly studying the process of change. And I think, as your audience could see, is the establishment is extremely well organized, and they've had systems going on for years and years. And the people who are part of this awakening, that's more decentralized and people are more pockets. I wouldn't say organization is a real strength yet, but I think if we're going to make headway in making change society, we need to be more intelligent about the process of change and about how to organize. And so I see this knowledge that I've acquired as extremely relevant to people who are really seeking to create a better world. Does that help? You understand where I'm coming from?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm going to be on mute whenever you're talking, just so you know.
Okay,
But
great.
okay, so the idea that change is going to cause controversy. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to ask you to be a little bit of a psychiatrist for me in this regard. I don't think this will bore the listeners, though. I'm sure they'll actually get something out of this because
Mm-hmm.
I went through change in my life, and it from a social standpoint, it caused a few problems. And I'd maybe like you to, like I said, play the role of psychiatrist, help me make sense of what happened, but also in case anybody else has to go through what I went through, maybe they could make sense of why society acts the way they did and why they treated me in the way they treated me, which I felt was discriminatory. And what I'm talking about is this. I used to be the kind of student, this is back in my days in the public school system, the brainwashing institution that is the public school system.
Mm-hmm.
I always took school seriously, always tried to get A's and B's, worked hard at everything. And then later, like in around 10th grade or so, late in 10th grade, I started to realize that a lot of the stuff I learned in public school is of no use in society. I was beginning to wake up to the fact that it was a bit of a scam. So I stopped taking school seriously. My grades dropped pretty significantly, and not to the point where you would call me a dumb kid or anything like that, stereotypically, but they still dropped. And I never felt ashamed of it because I began to realize this is all just a joke. Shouldn't care about my grades too much. And among other things, I also used to dress really smart. And then, like one day, in late 10th grade, I showed up like wearing an earring and a lot of black and stuff that you would find at Hot Topic. A lot of people said it was one of the biggest overnight changes they've ever seen in any student in any school and all that. And that doing that, plus the lack of care for school and also lack of care for the school code of conduct. I didn't really care if I got in trouble or anything or got a detention or did something that warranted a detention or something. And what happens was the school put me through so much evaluation, trying to find out what my private life was like, what my past life was like, getting my parents involved and all that, simply because I was not the smart kid that they thought they knew. And I found this quite discriminatory because, among other things, I assumed that the school would not care about this because I had, in addition to realizing that the school is a brainwashing institution, I also discovered, much to my just being disturbed and all that, that dumb kids get cut slack. If you're a dumb kid your whole life, the school's going to cut you slack. All they're going to do is give you detention if you do something wrong. But if you're a smart kid that does something wrong, you're going to get hollered at with a reprimand and then a detention and all that. They treat you more like that. Not only that, if you don't fulfill all the graduation requirements, you're not supposed to graduate. But when it comes to dumb kids, the schools will just hand them their diploma as a way of saying, "Get out of here. We don't care what happens to you." And I brought that to the school's attention, and they were trying to tell me, if you don't take school seriously, you won't graduate. And I was like, well, I know for a fact that kids in the years before me who graduated did not deserve to graduate because they didn't fulfill their requirements. And here's how I know they didn't fulfill their requirements. And all the school gave me in regards to a response to that was silence. They couldn't explain why they were just cutting the dumb kids slack and all that, and going hard on me and any other kid that decides to stop taking school seriously. So the thing that really disturbs me here is, what is it about human nature that would cause, in my situation, like society to pick on you just because you stopped taking life seriously in some area that they believe you should take seriously, and yet, but at the same time, they're willing to cut slack on all the stupid people who they think they have no hope for.
Well, it sounded like just getting a quick read of your situation that you're talking about expectations. I think you showed promising expectations, and so they were concerned about the sudden change, and other people who had shown a pattern of lower expectations that they weren't as, concerned because they didn't show the potential. So it sounds like, just from your description, that that seems to be kind of like maybe the key issue. But that kind of really segues into something that I really want to talk about, is like how to understand, how to make change. And there's this really, really helpful really basic kind of change model that I think helps people organize. Because a lot of times when the people want to make change, the first thing they think about is, yeah, what should you do? We should do X, we should do Y. But really, in this basic model, you'll see that figuring out what to do is always the third step. So that model is quite simply this. You want to really assess what's going on deeply. We call this the current state. That's like if you look at the model, it's like three circles going horizontally, and this is the one on the far left. And then the one on the far right is where you want to go. This is called the desired future state. And so in the middle is what you actually do. So anytime that you want to try to figure out how to make a change, you really need to understand deeply, what's going on, what's the current state. So like in your situation there, probably, that's why they were asking all these questions about your sudden change. They're interested in discerning what's going on with Andrew. What is his current state? And hopefully if they were doing it well, they would have checked in with you about where you're trying to go in life and try to come up with a plan to bridge that current state to that future state. So I think that's a tool that people can really use in the situation. That it works for small problems or for big problems. Another tool I think people should work, and this kind of applies to your situation too, but I think like you had mentioned a lot of different things. You talked about, your personal choices, and you talked about, what was going on with the teacher system. And I think one thing that really helps people in understanding, like making sense of complex stories, like the ones you're presenting and what's kind of going on in the world, is having a tool that kind of makes it simpler. And I really recommend this really simple tool. It's called the quadrants, which I pulled from something called integral theory. And so in this model, you basically, it's just really a 2x2 matrix where you have on the horizontal axis, internal and external, and on the vertical axis, you have the singular and plural. Actually, I think it's the other way around. It's the vertical axis is singular and plural, and the horizontal is singular, is internal and external. So basically, and I'll try to apply this to your situation, is so in each of these quadrants explain all the areas of human development. So in the internal singular, it's kind of what's going on in your head, what's your values, what's your emotional intelligence, what's your spirituality. So that's probably what they were trying to figure out, that part of you, to try and understand what's going on in Andrew's head, right? And so then you have to look at the singular external, which is, behavior and your physical, like your medical, your status, your health. And so if you're doing a diagnosis, you're going to want to look at someone's behavior and try to figure out what's influencing it. And is it health? Is it something in their head? Or is it something from these other quadrants, the lower quadrants? I'm going to talk about these new systems quadrants. And the internal plural is just referring to like interactions or culture or norms. We're talking in the English language, and so that's like, and we're using our society's norms. And so, in your situation, hopefully, if they were doing a good diagnosis, they would have asked you questions. You said they're asking about your family life, so that's what they were doing. They're trying to assess this lower left quadrant about social and culture, and hopefully they would have, if they were doing a good job, they should have been thorough and asked about school dynamics and just whatever else was going on. And then lastly is this external plural, which is like a systems dynamic, which we're, like about education system, the internet, the phone systems, political weather, anything that's kind of systems oriented. So this is kind of gets into looking at, other factors of the system, and as if anyone who's really done a deep dive into what's going on with the education system and look at people like John Taylor Gatto, and they realize that, it's not, when you really deconstruct the education system, there's more going on there. Like there's people are not teaching people to really discern things. They're focusing on memorization, and there's always an emphasis that the teacher or the test always have the right answers. And I don't think people realize that that's subtly teaching people that whoever is the authority figure, whether it's the test or the teacher, they are the ones who are right. And this kind of gets people leading into this kind of followership where they don't question authority. And so education is really playing a role there. So it's important to, as you can see, it's really important to look at each of these different aspects of reality. The model says they tetra and X. So stuff is happening. Reality is always a mixture of those four areas. So those are really good tools that I think will help people learn how to change.
Yes, that is right. I hope people will learn how to change, but you can't help but be a little pessimistic about it. And now I have to talk about a sensitive subject. That's probably one of the biggest problems with the world today. Well, there's several things there's a broad category, the category of apathy. Are you apathetic because you are paradigmatic? Are you apathetic because you are fearful, so you don't care about things you're fearful about? Or is one apathetic because they are just, well, what apathetic is comprised mostly of, the word pathetic. So it's kind of hard to determine why some people are apathetic uh, compared to other people, where it's kind of easy to deduce why they just don't care about things. But apathy is one of the reasons why we are still in a mess on this prison planet matrix, which, and I don't like using the term prison planet that much, I want to point out anymore, because I should think more positive now. But nonetheless, there still is like an Archon control system and such. And apathy is one thing that's holding us down. One of the best examples of apathy, I guess, could be the Snowden revelations of the NSA. Anybody who, it has come to my realization that a lot of people who say, I don't care about the NSA surveillance system because I have nothing to hide, that nothing to hide excuse is actually an apathy cop out of sorts. They're not really being honest when they say, I don't care just because I have nothing to hide. They're just saying, I do care and I don't like being spied on, but I feel that there's nothing I can do about it, so I'm just going to act apathetic about it and use a nothing to hide excuse as a way to get out of it. Well, anybody who understands what the NSA surveillance system is truly used for, it's basically the arch, the keystone, the keystone arch that holds the arch of tyranny together. And because if they can spy on everything, they can blackmail anybody rather easily, to anybody who steps out of line against what the New World Order wants. And I mean, the fact that the NSA surveillance system is not solving the answers to a lot of mysteries that could be answered. I mean, they were spying on everything that happened when all these false flags happened these past several years. Why aren't they using the surveillance system to show us the answer to those, to what happened to those false flags? Well, the obvious answer is because bad people control the NSA, and they intend to use the NSA for bad purposes. Anybody, regardless of whether or not you're hiding something incriminating, should be against the NSA for that simple reason alone. But apathy has caused a lot of people to not worry about it. And apathy is another reason why Edward Snowden is probably going to have to spend the rest of his life in the Russian embassy and be Vladimir Putin's bitch for quite a while. So why are people apathetic?
Andrew, that's a fantastic question. And I think it gets to the heart of why I am making this blog and doing this interview. I think people feel disempowered. And the whole reason I'm doing this is because I know how to change. I've changed a lot in my life. I know I've made organizational change. I understand the process of change. So part of the reason people are, there's a lot of reasons why people are acting, and we're going to talk about those and how to, and throughout the interview, hopefully we'll keep addressing how we can change that. But one thing is, I think people are totally overwhelmed by what's happening, and they feel just like, oh my God, there's this big, society's going direction. The powers to be are all powerful. I'm just, who am I? I'm just a consumer, and just trying to get by and just trying to look good. And people just don't feel empowered at all. That's one of the main reasons that they're apathetic. And this really ties into why I call my website Modeling the Way. Now, modeling the way is a term that just really refers that, it really emphasizes the point that each of us matters, and that we don't realize just how powerful, but we influence the people around us, either good or bad, depending on how you actually are, right? And so I'm trying to get people to realize that we actually impact people. If you're somebody who's, doing a lot of positive things, you're inspiring people, or if you're someone who's just going with the story and you're eating junk food and watching lots of reality TV, that's pretty uninspiring. And either one of those definitely impacts people. So I'm trying to help people see that, they can make a difference. But it's, you definitely have to go about it in an intelligent way. So one thing I love the title of your show, The Nature of Reality. That's perfect. And that really gets into my other model about saying the current state, because that's part of the current state, is understand the nature of reality. So one of the things I find really helpful to really start to empower people is to understand the nature of reality is about this term called distinctions. So like when we come into this world, it's basically out of the mother's womb, everything is a blob. We don't know what anything is, right? And so we start distinguishing, this is a chair, this is a bottle, this is your mom. We start to slowly build these different distinctions about how life is, or how we're actually, on a subtle level being indoctrinated. But the point is here that we're getting all these distinctions about how things are. And I think part of the problem is that people don't recognize how it really is. A lot of people, what happens is they get a certain set of distinctions, and then they decide this is it. This is how reality is. A lot of people, that stops after high school or undergrad, or and they just get into this. They adopt the distinctions that our culture emphasizes. Okay, but the truth is that if this is what people of higher consciousness do, is they realize that there's a bottomless pit of distinctions, and there are distinctions that allow us to have a higher consciousness, vibrate at a higher rate. And so for those people who are apathetic, you have to realize that there's a certain set of distinctions that have gotten us to where we are now, and there's another set of distinctions that take us to another place. And that's really what everything I'm talking about, is what are those specific distinctions. So in terms of not getting apathetic, I could say a ton of stuff here. Certainly you could look, I think, so to understand that, going back to that 4-quadrant model that we talked about before, there's an important concept that everyone really should understand, this thing called leverage. When I'm talking about leverage, I'm not talking about debt, but like physics leverage. It's like, where can you take, if you're picking something up, how can I use my weight and use the least amount of effort to get the most amount of gain? That's what leverage is all about, okay? And so the key is, and one of these distinctions, that is to understand the leverage that the elite have right now, and then also understand the leverage that the people have, so we can start to minimize what's going on with the establishment, and how they are, holding back humanity, and then what we can do it. So I feel like the establishment's leverage is all in that systems quadrant. They've developed a whole bunch of systems that help ensure that they stay in power. That's what it's all about. There's no doubt that they want to keep their position. And I think all the power of the people all starts in that upper left quadrant, where our mind. Everything starts with the individual, and individual people changing, growing, and then that they teach other people, and that changes culture. First they learn stuff, then they change their behavior, and then they influence other people, and then they build new systems. So that's kind of like the pathway out of here. So let's talk about a little bit about, it's important for people to understand, talk a little bit first about, I will first talk about the leverage that the elite have right now, and then we'll talk about that's holding us back, and then I'll get into the leverage that the people actually have to help, because I think it's important to understand both. So it's important to understand, like, just how we got here, and it's just some very brief in history. I think a lot of people don't get this, that during like the 1600s, when we had all these monarchs, we basically, they were just rolling through top-down dictatorships, and then a merchant class started to grow. Okay, and they started to take some power away from the kings and queens. They didn't like that. Okay, so they changed the system so that they adapted. The elites are always adapting to what's going on. That's one of their strengths, and we definitely need to adapt as well. So what they did was they developed corporations, and what they did was they made it so anyone who wants to have a business, that they get to invest in it. So any merchant who starts to make a lot of money, well, the kings and queens already have a big investment, so they're not gonna get ahead of the kings and queens, because they're also going to get rich with it too. And they also really got into central banking. I think they started doing like the coin of the realm, and they realized, currency has always been important, but I think they started really getting into this whole central banking. And I'm sure, as your audience knows, the banking system is certainly is one of the highest leveraged things that the elite have, is this access to money, or unlimited money. And so they've organized things in a very top-down, hierarchical, centralized fashion, and they're all about that. That's really their goal, because centralization is leverage, okay? And that's why they want a one-world government. It's simply leverage. That's it. They want it all centralized. They want to be able to control more people with less effort, and their name of the game is centralization. Okay, so that's why that they want that. That's really clear. a lot of people don't understand the banking system, but we really need to change that. That's one of the biggest strengths. They have access to pretty much, unlimited money. They got the system with quantitative easing and fractional reserve banking. We're not going to get into all that. Other people can research, but if you don't know about that, you should look that up online, because that gives them power to have, pretty much unlimited money. And the other thing to understand is how banking other ways, like interest rates. If you think about it, the rich who have money in the bank, they get, in normal times, they would get interest on their money and get richer. And then people who have to borrow or poor have to pay interest. So it's like, as Max Kaiser calls it, the interest rate apartheid wall. It fuels inequality. And also, they print more money. So you got to keep in mind when money first comes into play, it's not it's at the value it's currently at. So but the more money you print, it becomes worth less. So the people who have it first don't experience the inflation. Inflation is when you have more and more money out there. So that's kind of a huge hidden tax. So there's all these systems that the elites have done. So we talked about the educational system already. The elites can control the media. Some people think that's impossible, but people don't realize that. I'm sure your audience obviously knows that, but for other people who are listening, might not really think, well, how could they own all that? Well, think about it. The elite are behind the big banks. You put all your money in a 401ks. Who controls those 401ks? They're giant banks. Okay, so they have either direct ownership or ownership through other people's. So it's easy for them to influence who are the top people, which helps them drive their agenda. And the media, as you said, has a lot of propaganda and fear, and we don't have the discernment skills to get past the propaganda. Also, the fear, as you said, causes a lot of apathy. And the media does a huge job of dividing people up. They've got wing and the right wing. They've got people religious, not religious, people who are in the environment, other people who are into making money, the cat Wall Street, and they're all fighting each other instead of looking at their oppressors. And that's all driven by the leverage of the systems. And also the military-industrial complex. It's really people think it's about war, it's about control. The taxpayers pay these corporations, and then they go to these corporations where the ownership is of the elite, and they just make money. It transfers money to the majority of society to the wealthy. They use, as you mentioned, the false flags to start wars, to keep people in fear or remove civil liberties. And also, the food system, people eat a lot of unhealthy food, and that feeds to the apathy. So I've talked enough about the systems, but how do we get out of apathy? Let's get a little bit more optimistic here and talk about, so how do we get people who are unapathetic? So first thing is, you want to have energy. So I think it's really important, to take care of yourself. I mean, if you're eating crappy food and you're not exercising and you're just watching mainstream media and living in fear, you're not going to have any energy. Okay, so you want to start with trying to increase your energy as much as possible. So you want to stay away from things that drain your energy, like fear porn. It's on a lot of the mainstream medium, or even some alternative media websites that really just focus on the negative aspect. You want to really take care of yourself. You want to have a good healthy diet. I recommend, it's all about habits. It's what we do every day. I mean, as Mark Passio says, what's going on today is the composite of what everybody's doing. So we need to do things differently. And so if we're going to have energy, not only to take care of ourselves, but also make a difference in society, we got to get our own energy up. So I think learning how to meditation is a tool we can talk about. That's definitely another big one. But apathy is, also surrounding yourself with people who are positive. Because I think if you're in with a bunch of people who are always negative and apathetic, then you're going to be that way. I think there's a famous saying that you're the composite of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So yeah, try and build yourself a community that's positive and that's trying to do positive things. So anyways, that's a start there. We can talk about that more as the interview progresses.
Awesome, but a little bit things to elaborate on the money system specifically. I know it's hard when you talk about things like ETs and future predictions. It's hard to take people seriously, but this seems to be a little bit of a trend that I've noticed among those in the ET contact community in regards to how money is going to be changed a lot in the very near future. A couple of examples. Alex Collier at that Mount Shasta conference that I was at in August, this past August, talked about how are white hats behind the Treasury who are planning to dump the dollar and release a gold backed to or silver backed currency. Alex was, I should caution, he was kind of pessimistic though about how the dollar collapse was going to be. He said America is going to have to feel the brunt of that, and a lot of people are not going to handle the dollar collapse and the transition to the new currency well. He said that the people behind the Treasury wanted to do that on October 20th at the earliest. That, of course, did not happen. But then again, people are now going to be more skeptical about his claim since he gave a time period and it didn't actually happen. And also, Sheldon Neidl, I get weekly updates from Galactic Federation contactee Sheldon Neidl, who talks about how behind the scenes there are mass arrests. Winston Shroud also, he's not ET contactee, but he told me there are mass arrests behind the scenes. He's getting information about that, and people, whether they're ETs or not, that Sheldon Neidl and Winston Shroud are referencing, are doing mass arrests and planning to release some sort of a precious metal backed currency as part of a transition into no currency. And well, they didn't say like what Alex Collier did about the like being pessimistic because the dollar collapse will cause problems. But this whole thing, and also Andromeda Council contactee told like us talked about how we're going to transition to gold backed currency in the near future as part of a transition to no money at all. And getting back to it now, Alex Collier again, he's always said we're the only ET race on Earth here in the galaxy that uses money. I don't know of any others that do, and we'll make that whatever you will. But it just goes to show that Earth is it's still a prison planet. I said I don't want to use that word much anymore, but sometimes I got no choice. So this whole idea that in the near future the dollar will collapse, it will be hell on earth for a little bit before we transition to gold backed currency onto for maybe several years until we finally get back to a no currency system. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, you bring up a lot of interesting points. Okay, so let's start with one of the most important things I think people should understand is you really only can worry about what you can control specifically. So I think we do live in at times where there's a lot of change going on, and there's potential for disasters, whether it be war or climate disasters or hurricanes or whatnot, and then also financial collapses. And yeah, one more thing I would say about the financial system is that it's debt-based, and we just keep going more and more and more and more in debt, and that's not sustainable. At some point, there's going to be some sort of a change. I think a lot of people believe that a lot of the war stuff is being used to hide the banking system because the elites like to run this whole banking fraud over and over again. It's like an 80-year cycle. And so what they do is they create chaos, order out of chaos, like these wars with false flags and whatnot, to help mask what's really going on with the financial collapse. So first off, people should be prepared for disasters. Okay, that's what you can control. So that definitely that means just having extra food in the house, having some water, you definitely want to have a diverse. I'm not a financial expert, but I do think it's wise to have a diverse portfolio of currencies. You don't want to be all in stocks or bonds or cryptocurrencies or gold or silver. I think it's probably good to have, diversity is definitely something good. But I think you want to be prepared in case that happens. I think another thing what you brought up is a lot of like, how do we discern like what's true and what's not? And there's just so much information out there in the mainstream media and alternative and you have to try and figure out how do we figure out what's actually true and what's not. I think that's one of the reasons that people get really apathetic. They don't really know. They're like, I don't know. There's so much out there, conflicting perspectives, and I think that's intentional. The elites love to obfuscate. That's one of the main strategies. One of the getting back to your point about apathy, that's a core strategy for sure, is to have people fighting with each other and low energy and all this kind of confusing information, so people don't really know what's going on. I think, so that's definitely a huge strategy to be aware of. So I definitely recommend that people not to get overly caught up in what I would call the fear porn, whether it's mainstream or alternative, and to focus on, developing yourself. What can I contribute to this change? Like, you have a show that's exposing people. I think that's great, Andrew. I mean, as we talk about modeling the way, by you being active out there, you're showing a positive role model that, you can influence some people, as like I am, just by coming on the show. And so, we want to focus on what we control. Sure, be prepared for disasters. Again, like the whole alien ET thing, I find I have a hard time knowing what's true and what isn't in that field. It's one of the most obfuscated, in my opinion. I'm not really an expert on that, so I can't really speak that intelligently, whether they're here or whether there's other dimensions, or it's just all a ruse to have a fake alien attack. I don't really know. The truth is, if there really are powerful aliens on this Earth, and they're way more powerful than us, then, there's not that much we can do about that. So I don't really worry about that, honestly. I don't know if that's true or not. Again, getting back to what can I really control? I'm really more about reaching more people about the things that I'm really confident about that are true. I try and, when I speak, I really am careful. I'm like, do I really know is this true? If not, I'm just gonna, there's like that ET thing. Like, I don't dismiss it at all. I think for sure, I know for sure the elite have a secret space program. I've definitely seen an insane amount of evidence on that. And there could be other things going on. I'm definitely not against that. And I think this is an example of how to do what I would call proper discernment, which is like, don't have strong opinions about things until you look into it. And then if you look into something and it's confusing, then just be honest about this. Like, I don't know, it's confusing. I haven't figured it out yet. Like, don't too many people just like jump to like, oh, aliens, no way, or so obviously I know you're way more looked into that than I have. So, but I just, in general, I think people should definitely, in terms of trying to figure out sort of about discernment, I wanted to say a little bit more about that. I think one of the things that people really can do here is talk about understanding our biases, this term you may have heard called confirmation bias, which just means that what most people do is they have a certain worldview based on the people that are surrounding them or the information that they look at, and then they constantly look for things to confirm it. And when they see information that doesn't actually have anything to do that disagrees with the worldview, it's a psychology phenomenon called cognitive dissonance, just meaning that some things they've got data that breaks their current worldview. What they usually do is they just dismiss it right away. And really, if you want to be a higher consciousness person, you have to try and get in touch with your biases. Try and go watch yourself or ask your friends, what are your biases? Maybe start writing them down. And then when you notice that you're confirming that, there's this idea of kind of reflecting and watching yourself. It's a really important part of being a higher consciousness person. So, and the other thing is to surround yourself with people with diverse perspectives in terms of, and so check things with them. Hopefully people who also are in touch with their cognitive bias, ideally. But it's always good to try and, like, I don't only listen to one kind of media. I try and take a little bit from each worldview. I look at stuff from liberal, conservative, alternative, mainstream, and I try and weed myself through it to try and figure out what's true. And I don't always know, and that's okay. I do the best I can. I think another huge part of having better discernment is, again, of getting better at bias, is about having an open mind. I think most people, again, stick to what they know. I think people will, especially on big issues where they have a lot of time, to consider all the perspectives, be thorough. And I think you've talked about the trivium on your show. That's a good one to look at who, what, why, kind of connect the dots. So anyways, those are some of my thoughts on that issue.
Thank you very much. And even though you're not a financial expert, I guess it wouldn't hurt to ask you this anyway, because Alex Collier said he's not a financial expert. When I asked him this at the conference after he gave his talk, I was one of the people who wanted to ask him a question, and I asked him, since the dollar is supposed to collapse soon, would it be a good idea for us to prepare for the dramatic change that's going to happen as a result of the dollar collapse? Here's my strategy that I suggested. I said, I propose that we all try to buy as much gold, silver, and storable food and other supplies, economic collapse supplies as possible. And the way we go about buying it is that we max out all our credit cards, take out as many loans as possible, use all that money that we got from loans to buy gold, silver, and other things. And if they ever try to come after us for not paying the loans, we just ask them to prove that they gave us money at all because their money was backed by something, and they can't prove that, of course, so no debt was ever made. And so when the dollar collapses, we don't have to worry about paying back all that money that we accrued from maxing our credit cards and taking out loans, because when the dollar collapses, all those debts that were ever accumulated are going to be wiped out anyway. Is that a good or a bad idea? I asked him for us to do that. Well, the first thing Alex Collier did before speaking was he actually started clapping. He was applauding, and so did everybody else in the audience. And then after everybody stopped applauding, he said, "Well, I'm not a financial expert, so I'm not really one to give advice on that. But that's basically what the elites are doing. The people that know that a collapse is imminent, they are basically, for all intents and purposes, maxing their credit cards and printing money out of thin air to buy as much gold and silver as possible." So I basically was trying to say, yes, that is a great idea. Go ahead and get yourself in debt up to your eyeballs to prepare for the collapse. Just buy things to prepare for it. But he didn't really want to admit that because maybe he'd sound like a stupid an economist, even though he's not an economist. Whatever. But is it a good
So
idea, do you think, for us to max out our credit cards and take out loans and buy on gold and silver and such, and not worry about paying the debt off? And then when the dollar collapses, it'll all be wiped off anyway.
Well, so yeah, I mean, here's my strategy on that. I am not in. That's very fear pornish to me. That worldview. I agree, as I said before, about being prepared up to a point. I mean, I think you want to hedge your bets in case all these different scenarios play out, and I think you want to have. So I think having some alternative currencies is good. I think having some preparations is good. I think he's missing some of the most important parts, though, about preparing for changes. One, I think you want to have a good community, good relationships with people, because we're going to have to lean on each other. So, and also you want to be good with yourself spiritually. So why don't I talk a little bit about those things? Because we're going to have to, if we're going to want to, I guess my perspective is, yes, there's going to be shocks to the system. Okay. And that's part of the process, but I'm personally, while I'm aware of those things, and as I said, I take some precautions for it, my real focus is how we make big changes for the long term. I'm looking more. And so I think you can do both with a lot of these things I'm going to be talking about. I think community is super important. I talked about that before, about having a positive community, but if we're going to change society, we're going to have to get past this divide and conquer stuff. So we're going to have to build bridges. We're going to have to develop better interpersonal skills. We're going to have to better relationship skills. And if there's a lot of chaos, we're going to need each other to help each other. So it covers, not only does it help us make a better world, but it also helps us get through that. So I think there should be a strong focus on people getting, working through learning to learn to work with other people. So why don't I start with, I mentioned meditation before, but I think this is a great time to delve into that, because I think this is a tool that's going to help us both with dealing with the collapse and with dealing a better world. And I'm going to get real concrete, because I think a lot of people think, oh, meditation, woo-woo, what does that do? But I'm a very experienced meditator. I've been doing it hardcore for 4.5 years, and I have a coach, and I take a lot of classes. So it's something I know a lot about, and I can speak deeply and confidently about how it can really help you in a crisis, and also help create higher consciousness and a better world. So let's talk about that a little bit. So one thing is we want to be operating from a deeper place. So one of the things you learn when you meditate is that, and even if you don't meditate, most people realize this, is that you can actually watch your thoughts. Okay, so there's kind of like two phenomenons going on in your head. There's this automatic thoughts that just sort of happen, and then there's this deeper place that can observe your thoughts. And what I've come to learn is that your thoughts are kind of like automatic, kind of monkey mind, and they kind of more come from the past generally. A lot of people have early childhood experience. All of us have early childhood experiences. Sometimes we have everyone has trauma, some less significant than others, but that develops kind of like unconscious behaviors. Some people call like shadow, stuff that we don't, unless we really work at it, we can't see it, but has a big impact on our life. Okay. And what I've noticed is that when I can operate from that voice that like watches my thoughts, I'm a lot more powerful. So meditation is a tool to help us to really operate from that deeper place. A lot of people consider that, your soul, for example. And whether you're religious or not, it could just be a deeper place of you. It works for everyone, no matter what your spirituality is. So, again, when you sort of like, for example, do a simple meditation exercise where you're following your breath, and you're tracking it, and what you're kind of doing is you're kind of one that has many benefits, improves your concentration, but it also kind of like gives you a little bit more space. The more you meditate, you realize that you can kind of watch. You're not actually like thinking as much because you're following your thoughts, and that gives you a little space between your thoughts, your automatic thoughts, and your deeper self. And that little bit of space gives you a chance to change your behavior. So we're talking about change here. And if people are real serious about wanting to change their own behavior, this is a huge tool that really opens up where a lot of people are stuck. So additionally, there's a lot you can do with it. The more you are not reacting to your emotions, you can develop what's called self-mastery, which is just like you kind of control your own behavior more. You stop making less bad mistakes, and once you start having less bad mistakes, your confidence goes up, man. You start getting more confidence. Is huge. Confidence is the more confidence you have, the more you can take risks. The more you take risks and you reflect on those risks, whether they go well or not, you either learn if you're reflecting on your behavior, you're either learning what worked and what didn't work. And if you learn what didn't work, you can correct it next time. So I'm a huge fan of taking risks and learning. Or if we're going to create a better world, we're going to have to experiment with new behaviors. It's super important. And so, and this meditation really helps with that. Another thing meditation teaches you is that you are, for example, like if you're following your breath and you lose it, like you get to all of a sudden start thinking, you're taught just to go back. Once you catch yourself, go back to the breath and stop, don't get upset about it. And that really helps us teach us something that's super important, which is just resiliency. Yes, we're going to make mistakes, but we got to keep pushing forward. A lot of the research shows that people who are really successful, they're resilient. Sure, they make mistakes, but they get up and keep going. It's the people who are continuous learners. Also, when you're operating from that kind of deeper place, you can get more in touch with who you really are, your personal values, your purpose. Okay, and that's what we want to create, a better society. One that's it's just reacting to things and living in fear. That's where we are now. That's the current state. And we want to live in the future state, one where there's going to be where we have higher level consciousness people who can control their emotions, people who are operating out of their values and their ethics. And so meditation is a great tool to get in touch with our purpose and our values. People, once you're kind of operating from that deeper place and you can do different exercises, you can, Google like value sort and kind of look at different values. And one thing you do is just like prioritize them, look at a website with a whole bunch of them. I know that I did that, and that really helped me figure out what I was important to. Another concept that I really want to bring into this is this idea of being a spiritual warrior. And that term really means just trying to be your like best self and your deeper spirit, your soul, your most idealized self. And a spiritual warrior is somebody who really kind of tries to make that manifest in the real world. we want to create a higher world. We can't be living in for fear, being doomsday preppers. And that's not going to get it done. That's not going to create a higher world. Yes, we should be aware of that possibility and have some preparations for it, but we don't want that to dominate our lives. What we do want to be the focus of our lives is to develop ourselves to be better people individually, and then collectively build better systems. Like the Bitcoin people and cryptocurrencies are trying to deal with the financial problem I talked about earlier. And that's a terrific technology that allows to get rid of corrupt middlemen. Basically, for people who aren't aware of it, just at a high level, it's basically an asset ledger that's kind of protected by cryptology, and it's there's a lot of technical stuff. I don't want to bore people with that, but that's a really powerful tool that takes away a lot of our problems. Is like we have banking, and we need some sort, until we get to an ability where we can live without money, as you're saying, we need one step better than that, better than where we are now, is to not have a corrupted financial system. And so the blockchain can help take away that corrupt middleman, because it allows to have some of those things that middlemen were doing, just puts it in this kind of transparent ledger. And that's definitely one of the promising things. And so I would encourage people to get your own house in order. And then how can you make yourself a better person? And then what's your passion? What's your role? And how can you get involved? And what area of this problem do you want to work on? Do you want to work on better food? Do you want to work on the pollution problem? Do you want to work on getting people better discernment skills? Do you want how are we going to, try and maybe have a society that's less based on violence and more voluntary? That there's so much work to be done, and we all have a role to play. I really believe that. Each and every person who's listening to this and not listening to this, if you want to, this is an amazing time to be alive. I know there's a lot of scary stuff happening, but change. All society is telling us is that the old way of doing things isn't working, and it's time to create a new world. And you want to get part of communities that are actively trying to create that better world, and surround yourself with people in that. And that's what my website's going to be all about, is about what can we actually do? How can we make ourselves better individuals? And then from that, a better collective, because, and by collective, I just mean groups of society, because really all collectives is just groups of people. So we really need to get individual people together, and then get more systems and culture that are more work for everyone and not for the one that we have now, which was specifically designed to help the current establishment elite remain power. And so waking up to all these dark unveilings about what's going on, that's important. That's part of understanding the current state, like I talked about in the beginning. But that's only one part of this whole change process. We have to understand what a better world looks like, and then how can we get there individually and then as a group. And that's kind of what I'm all about, at least. So.
Yeah, that's what I'm all about too, trying to fix things. But since you mentioned discernment skills, that's something I've actually wrestled with myself in a few issues, because many times, excluding many times on my show, in fact, there's been situations where I realized that a certain person in the field of research said something, and then another person, or at some point another person in the same area of research or similar area of research, said something else about the same subject, and I realized there was a contradiction going on. And on one hand, well, someone say, "Well, just use your own discernment." Well, people need to understand there are times when even using your own discernment is not going to help you come to an answer. So you might be tempted in such a situation to approach the people that made conflicting statements about the same subject and say to them, "Well, you said A, you said B, both of you can't be right, so which one of you is right?" Now, some might say that's a bad way of seeking answers, because you might inadvertently cause a conflict among the people who you're trying to get the answer from. So if you're ever in a situation where using your own discernment does not get you the answer, and you feel an urge to confront the people who give conflicting statements, do you have any advice to try to get the answer if you're in a situation like that?
Yes, I do, actually. I think that's a great question, actually, because I think conflict skills are super, super important in terms of creating a society of higher consciousness. So I got a couple tools for you that are really going to help you out, or help everyone out who's going to listen. So one is the thing called, there's a guy, Harvard professor named Chris Ardress, and he's got a couple of great tools. One is this thing called ladder of inference, okay? And basically what he's pointing out is that everybody comes to these conclusions, but the ladder is a reference to how did they get to these conclusions, you know? So what was the data they used? What are the logic that they're working through? What are the deeply held assumptions that they have that they might not even be aware of, okay? And all of us, for every topic, have those kinds of things. We have data that we've been exposed to. We've got assumptions, a logic we work through. And so if you really want to really get into conflict, and I don't think conflict is bad. A lot of people are scared of conflict, but if you have really good conflict skills, you love conflict, man, because conflict, especially with two people with good conflict skills and with good emotional intelligence skills, like they can really talk about something deeply without getting all personal. You can learn a lot, and I'm really into learning. That's one of my big things. So basically, what you want to do is so you take that idea is you want to try and understand each other's ladder of inference. You want to help them understand, as I said, what data are they looking at, what is the logic, what are the assumptions, and so the process of doing that is something called balancing inquiry and advocacy. Okay. And really what that means, inquiry just means asking questions. Advocacy just means advocating for your perspective. So basically what you want to do is you want to be self-aware and you want to say, okay, this is why you want to balance these. Half the time you want to be like, okay, these are the reasons why I think this is true. This is my logic. These are the data I've seen. Maybe you haven't seen it. Maybe you haven't thought about these perspectives. And so that's you want to do advocacy, but then you want to balance that with, inquiry. It's sincere inquiry, not just going through the motions. It's like, okay, I understand you have a different perspective than me. Great, this is an opportunity to learn. And if you engage in this process, you get out of like a debate. It's more about a dialogue, a deep dialogue. A deep dialogue can be win-win. You can both learn, even if you don't agree. At least you're taking in information from other perspectives with an open mind. And so the inquiry part is just like, okay, I understand that you have that perspective and it's different from my perspective. Fair enough. Maybe you're right, maybe you're not. I don't really know. Let's explore this. Can you tell me what makes you think that? What data points are you using to make that decision? Walk me through your logic, and then you kind of go back and forth. And then you get more, and through that, actually, you build relationship. You start, if you can do that each calmly, and then you're going to, even if you don't agree ultimately on what you're talking about, at least you're doing it in a way that's positive, and you can both learn something from it potentially. And it's just broadening it rather than kind of bumping heads. Okay. Another huge thing to understand in terms of conflict skills is there's something that's called the blind spot. Okay. And this is a really cool, most people are not aware of this. But when people are interacting like you and I, okay, there are two things that I am aware of about me and two things I'm aware about you. And you are unaware of those four things. And the reverse is true for you. So let me get into exactly what it is. So what I can see about me is what my intention is, what I'm trying to convey in this conversation. I can see what kind of constraints I'm up against. Am I tired? What's going on with me in my environment? Whatever that's kind of going on. And then what I can see about you is I can see your actions and I can see how they impact me. Okay. Now, you cannot see my intentions, and you cannot see what I'm up against, and or not always at least, because, could be emotional things that are hidden. And you can't understand, you can't see yourself, you can't see your actions, at least not necessarily in the moment the way I'm perceiving it, and you won't understand that impact. And then the reverse is true for you. So you've got these four things kind of going on, and what you can do if you realize that these dynamics are in place, what you can do is start to talk about them. You could be like, let's say you get in a situation where someone's like really offended you, okay? And so that's the impact they're having on you. That's the action that they can't see. So you can be like, hey, time out. I just want to make you aware that what you just said impacted me in this way, okay? And I don't know, and then don't accuse them then. Instead of assuming, because you're aware of you don't know what their intentions or constraints are, you don't accuse them. You don't just say, oh, they're a jerk. You be like, oh, you give them a chance to respond. And like, is that your intention to have this impact on me? Was it, maybe there's something about your situation I don't understand, or you're not aware of how you're coming across. And that allows a deeper conversation so you can really get to the dynamics of what's really going on. Okay. So that comes up so often in conflict. It's a really important thing to understand. And as far as like trying to figure out like what's true or what's not, I probably need a specific example, but you just have to work through the logic of each person's thing, and because that kind of situation is highly, I think you have to realize everything's kind of highly contextualized. It kind of depends on the specifics. But if you're, that the way you're relating to each other is more aligned with the ways that I'm talking about versus kind of like how our society portrays with these crazy debates and whatnot, and these talking heads yelling at each other, which is highly unproductive, I think you'll have a much more higher success rate in working through conflict. Hope that helps.
Thanks. You explained it pretty well. And in regards to what I say, I want to talk about what we see in the future, but contradictory thing here. I also wanted to talk about the idea of living in the now, because a lot of people in the metaphysics community say you got to accept the fact that space and time are illusions in order to raise your consciousness, and to accept the fact that time is an illusion, you have to live in the now. And that means it is not in your best interest to look ahead to see what the weather's going to be, or plan ahead for what the future schedule may be. And a lot of people, of course, would have a tough time doing things like that. And of course, a lot of people would assert, well, you realize that there are definitely situations where you almost have no choice but to look into the future, or should I say, plan ahead into the future and do some research on what kind of timeline occurrences, for lack of a better phrase, are going to occur, so you can schedule yourself well. So, how exactly do you balance out trying to live in the now to raise your consciousness, while at the same time acknowledging the fact that there are instances where you pretty much have no choice but to plan for the future and research what the future might be? In like, if you're traveling somewhere, you have to research what the weather might be, for example. So, how do you solve that contradiction, or try to solve it?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to get very specific about how to best apply that. I think that idea of being in the now is money, but that doesn't actually mean that you never look at the future. And so really what the being in the now means, and it's definitely something we all want to achieve, is what that means is actually you don't want to be like thinking, overly obsessing about the past, like worry or anxiety, or that's or like that kind of leads to depression. I mean, I think it's okay at times to look at things, to reflect on them and learn, but I think a lot of people just obsess on their mind about things that have happened in the past, and that gets them down usually, or they're worried about things that are going to happen in the future, like an economic collapse or war, and that's not being in the now, that's being in the future, right? That's causing anxiety. So being in the now means being really present, okay? Really present to what's going on in your current circumstances, right? To as deep as you possibly can, So like how I'm being in the now right now, just to give you a really clear example, is, I'm really listening to you very carefully, okay? I am aware of my intentions in this interview about, the things that I'm passionate about, and about how to make a better world. And I'm aware of the audience and trying to articulate things that in a way that hopefully people can understand them, you and the audience. And, I'm just really present to what are the dynamics now. I'm not, worrying, oh, is Andrew going to ask me a tough question, or is my phone going to, it's like, I'm really here now, present. And that's what they mean by being in the now. Okay. But, I think as some wise teachers have, a lot of people have said, as we know, we're kind of here on earth to kind of witness, to really take in deeply in the now, like what's really happening. And just by doing that, being really present and then commenting on it, we can then make positive changes. There seems to be, if you just kind of do, if you're into like metaphysics, which just means it's kind of like looking at the big picture of everything, there does seem to be something to this idea that there's something innate about human nature or about nature, about evolution, right? And so just by witnessing things being really current now, you're really helping evolution, because that's what we're commenting on. And I think, because evolution, I think, is spiritual, okay? And I think there's just something, as I said, there's something metaphysical. It just seems obvious when you look at everything. There's the philosopher is like a tell us about society that we're moving in this direction of trying to be better and more involved. And so that's kind of natural. So I don't think it's wrong to look to want a better life. I think it's actually deeply spiritual. But so I think you want to be in the moment. You're asking yourself, what is the current state? And then you're commenting with me, oh, this could be better. And then this gets back to the model I was saying before. It's like, well, if the current state's not good, where do we want to go? And then how do we want to do it? So, like, you do want to think about, the future, like what can we build and create, and not in kind of an anxiety kind of way. I mean, you do want to be aware of negative things that happen and be prepared for them, and I call that scenario planning. I think that's a real smart thing to do. I think anyone at a higher conscious level is a scenario planning. They're aware of different possibilities, and that gives them mentally and perhaps otherwise prepared for these different potential manifestations. But I think we have to realize, again, this idea about spirituality. I think what I've come to realize when I've really deeply thought about spirituality from like a more, because I've actually come from a secular perspective, and I've never really been religious. I mean, I was a little bit of Judaism growing up, but I've never really been that into the religious thing. But as I've kind of gotten older and I've gone into meditation, into philosophy, I really thought about these kind of big metaphysical questions more. And I really come to notice my idea of like what makes God, or I like to like the term source. What is it? And it's that to me, source is what the source of existence itself. Okay, and so that's what kind of makes sources that they can manifest realities. But I think what people don't realize is that, or what they should, is that human beings can create new worlds. We have imaginations and we have behaviors to build new things. We are God-like, okay? Something in that way, there's that Hermetic phrase, as above, so below. So I think we are not at all, there's no way that we are like powerless consumer people. I think of us, when we're at our higher consciousness level, we're God-like. We're imaginative creatures. We're people who can think and create new things, and we can work together with these better interpersonal skills and conflict skills, and we can build something. And I think I see all the bad problems that are happening, but I'm really in tune with also that community that's trying to build a better world, and I definitely have a foot in both, because again, you need to understand the current state, so you can't totally ignore all the negative things that are happening. So you need to know, but I don't dwell on it, okay? And I say, okay, that's going on, I need to know about it, but I'm trying to put more of my energy in what can we do to make a better world. And there's a lot of people out there who's really putting some energy into this, and the goal here is to, more and more people modeling that behavior inspires other people to do it, and that's what we're trying to do. I think it's happening, honestly. It's just it's like a snowball. It starts slow, it starts like one person, two people, and then just starts spreading and bigger. And the more people who are doing it, it affects more and more people. And so that's kind of what's happening. I think if you're in this big change game and you're excited about creating a new world, okay, you got to be patient. Nothing happens fast. No big change happens fast, either on an individual level, let alone a society level. So it's all about the baby steps, okay? All of us need to be, each day, like, what baby steps can I do to be a better person, to help the world be a better place? And if we all get focused on what are our values, what are our purpose, what's my role in this big picture change, and you focus on those, and also try to minimize the downside of the negative things that are happening. Don't close your eyes to them, but you want to minimize them, but don't let them overwhelm. I think that's the pathway, to creating a better world. And I'm super enthusiastic about what's happening. I think, that with the yin and the yang, sometimes in order to create a new world, the old world has to fall apart, and that's kind of what's happening. I'm super optimistic. I understand there's going to be suffering. That's definitely part of the process of getting better, and I definitely want to minimize as much as possible. But people are suffering now, and they will continue to suffer. But I think the longer term view is more positive.
Thanks. I'll get back to that later in the interview. I do want to address that. But before that,
Okay.
when you do look into the future, some say there's really no better way to do it than, or no more better metaphysical way to do it than astrology and numerology. Do you have any comments about using astrology and numerology in regards to changes in society?
Um, so just a minor comment other than, well, first thing is I have some minor awareness of those things, and I am not deeply knowledgeable in them. But I know some people who are and suggest there's something to that stuff. Something of my understanding, though, is, and again, I'm not an expert, is that stuff's subtle, okay, and that might lay the groundwork. But I think I go back to that's something I can't control. I can't control the astrology. And I know I personally am not aware. I'm not knowledgeable. I'm enough about numerology to use it in any way yet. So if other people do, I'm open to that kind of stuff. But I get back to what I said earlier, which is what do I know about it? What can I control, and how can I leverage that to make a better world? And then also just be open minded to other things that I know some people have a more materialist perspective are gonna write that stuff off. I don't. I'm a very open minded person. But yeah, I think I think keep in mind there's an overwhelming amount of things to know about in life. It's just enormous, and I think you gotta trust your deeper self and go to the things that deeply resonate with you, your spirit, your soul, who you deeply are, and trust those things. I mean, we're not all of this are going to be able to deal with all the problems and look into every little thing. We have we have a limited amount of time on the planet, so I think there's a balance between keeping an open mind and looking things, but also then, who are you and what are you doing, and then narrowing. That's a constant kind of going of divergence, which means kind of like looking broadly, but then convergence, coming more narrowly. And so, all of us are going to go through stages where you do some of that each, and then you look broadly, you look at different things, and you go, oh, this grabs me, and this grabs me, and I'm going to go deeper here. And that's kind of like that's kind of how I look at it, and you lock in on the things that are eventually over time. It might not happen right away. So people who don't know what their purpose or their values are, hey, we've all been there. It's a process. Don't get upset about it. It's something you reflect on, and you happen through life experiences. So anyways, that's my 2 cents on that.
All right. Another thing in regards to the future and maybe how to prepare for it, looking at the fact that time is cyclical. The Mayans had it right, and the rest of our ancestors, for that matter, when they created calendars and such that don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on. They created calendars that basically go through a system of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, because they understood that while the exact same events start happening throughout time, the ebb and flow and the nature of those events goes is in some sort of a cyclical pattern throughout time, and that would show in graphs and such. If you were to graph it mathematically to show how many of this happened this year in relation to same thing happening X many years, and then the same cycle of time and such. So don't know if you've looked into this in great detail, but in regards to preparing for change, specifically by looking at how time, the ebb and flow of events throughout time has cycled and changed, and trying to maybe plan for the future that way. Any comments on cycles throughout time and change?
Yeah, that's there's all sorts of like interesting perspectives about the deep nature of reality, and the multiple layers that you go beyond the 3D reality that most only people recognize, and you can definitely there's a huge body of literature on that kinds of stuff that you're talking about, astrology, and I have chosen to those things. I'm aware that some of the things in there, I have not gotten to a place where I could say this one, I feel like this is true or this isn't true, or I think there's probably there's some truth to some of that. But specifically, I think I think you want to be, looking broadly and looking what's around and being aligned with. I think there's something about energizing. If you align, I trust that there's something deeper about the world. The mystery of existence, and then, I kind of see like, checking in with our deeper self. I think a person who's living a happy, fulfilled life is checking in with that deeper part of themselves, and they're aligning themselves with it. And they're going to, not only by doing that, they're going to make themselves personally satisfied. But I think what you're doing actually is aligning with spirit when you do that. And let me be more specific about that. I'm talking about someone who's really doing deep work, who's able to operate from that deeper witnessing voice, someone who's worked on their shadow and gotten past their past, and people who are able to get past some of the traps that all human beings kind of have to go through to achieve this higher energies. And when you align with that deeper part after doing that kind of work, then you are aligning with the purpose, I think, of spirit in general. And that's how you want to be aligned with kind of what's going on, I mean, so I mean, I think, do you look at it right now? Do you want to be aligned with perpetuating a system about materialism and that creates a system that creates kind of debt slavery, or people are, just reinforced, or do you want to go with the momentum of all the people who are trying to go with making the world a better place? In fact, I think in the beginning of the interview we talked about leverage, and not only does the human beings, I'm kind of describing the inner process of how we have leverage in our mind, in our spirit, and our soul, but the people are aligned with trying to make what's good for all people. Okay, so I think that's a huge point. I mean, I think the fact that ultimately I do believe that that's a huge energy that we have, that we're kind of pushing for it. And a lot of people think it just the elites are as an enemy, and I think on one level it's true. But I think in another perspective, if you really believe that, if you notice that the world is about change and evolution, so you take a more metaphysical perspective, what you can notice is that the elite are creating the conditions for change by going so far in this tyrannical system and getting more and more. Look at the income inequalities. It's a prime example. It's going more and more crazy with more people just going up to the top. They're creating the conditions for people to change and grow, and why that's happening. It's just part of the master plan of spirits, but it's obvious that they, on one hand, they're causing a lot of problems, but they're also helping people grow, because a lot of people don't grow until they're on fire. Unfortunately, and not as many people are proactive about change. I was lucky to grow up with parents who are social workers, so I learned about change as a little kid. So I have a huge advantage in that way, and I'm definitely going to be spending the rest of my life helping other people do that. But most people don't really change until there's like a fire. So the elite are creating a fire, so they're fueling change. So if you, hopefully, people are going to, as they get more and more aware of this current state, they're going to want to align with the good of society, and creating a better world, rather than perpetuating the system that's becoming slowly more and more overt to just about how crazy it is. I mean, I think this is, I think it's an exciting time of change.
Yes, and if things really do get all love-based and enjoyable out on this planet, and we get back to what things were like when Atlantis and Lemuria were really heart-based and joyous, some have suggested that we should perhaps get rid of government and replace it with a council of elders. Okay, a couple of issues here. Why was government created? To exert by any force to protect the rights and property of everybody under the auspices of that government. So is having government bad? No, of course not. Provided, of course, the government understands that exerting by any force to protect the rights and property of everyone under that government is their one and only job. But some would say that it is impossible for government to act like that. They will eventually become corrupt. And of course, we realize that when the people created the government, they didn't realize that the people that they were putting in power in the government were basically Illuminati bloodline creatures, be they ET or non-ET, reptilian based or not reptilian based. in the high positions of government to protect them and their rights and all. They didn't realize that over the course of time that would be a problem. And so, is having government a bad idea? Well, who really not realizing who you put in power is beside the point. It's can the government control itself to the point where it will only exert by force to protect your rights, and also the Council of Elders ish idea. Some would say that's basically tantamount to a dictatorship of 12 people or however many people, maybe on the Council of Elders. That's another issue. How many people is too many or too little people? And how do you have to create a constitution for these elders, or do you not have to create some sort of a constitution for these elders? And a lot of questions that need to be raised there. So there's this video I'd certainly recommend called Global Unity. I think it's called Global Unity Project, What the World Needs Right Now. It's on the in5d.com. Greg Prescott, I believe, made that. Good Facebook friend of mine, Greg Prescott is, and he recommends Council of Elders in that. And I think he also recommends getting rid of government. But regardless of what he or anybody else thinks, I'm going to ask you, John, do you support the idea of getting rid of government? And do you not support the idea of having a council of elders? And if you do support a council of elders, how in the hell do you propose we regulate them?
Yes. Okay. Great question, Andrew. So really what we're talking about here is getting back to what we talked about at the beginning, those 4 quadrants, which is how do we organize the systems quadrant so potentially to maximize the other, create a great culture, create amazing people. So the first thing to recognize is there's not one answer, okay? As I kind of pointed out, as we're going through evolution. Evolution is a constant. People, technology's changing, culture's changing, individual people are changing, slowly, but genes are changing, So we're in a dynamic process. So the idea that there's one way to organize that's right is completely ridiculous. Okay, we want that as a way of organizing is going to evolve as all those other things are evolving. So I don't believe there is one right way. So in that quadrant, where the systems quadrant, we're looking for functional fit. So what, given the current consciousness of the individuals and all, whether at the mixture of it and the culture, different cultures, what is the best organizing kind of system? And then, so first off, nobody has all the answers there. Okay, so number one, we need to realize that we need to experiment. Okay, nobody's got the answers on all this stuff. So we got to be willing to try things out, new things out. Right now, what we're doing, I think one way to describe our current system that I loved, and maybe you've heard this term before, but the inverted totalitarianism. And I think Chris Hedges talks about this a lot. Here's a definition. It's described as a system where corporations have corrupted and subverted democracy, where economics trumps politics, and in an inverted totalitarianism, every natural resource and every living being is commodified and collapse. As citizenry is lulled and manipulated into surrendering their liberties and participation in government through excess consumerism and sensationalism. So that's kind of where we're at now. That's not a great system, I think, to make humanity strive. So one thing I do think, because we have to recognize what's really happening in the world, and so one of the things that we have to recognize is that there are sociopaths, psychopaths, sociopaths who have no thoughts and feelings for others. I think I heard statistics that maybe like 5% of the population is like that, and that they tend to organize and be deceptive. And so, whatever's, obviously there's a lot of interpretation about what the elite are, whether they're, there's some things from other dimensions or other worlds. I don't really know the answer to those questions, but at a minimum, we can say they're psychopaths. And they have serious, what we would call in the psychological world, personality disorders. And so we need to build systems with way better checks and balances, okay? Because what we're doing right now is psychopaths have captured the system. No questions about it. I don't think anybody disagrees about that, or at least, that there's a lot of corruption and greed. And so I think one of the elites wants centralization because that gives them more. They have to do less. They influence more people. So to me, one of the keys of the future, at least the near future solution, and again, it's always going to evolve as time evolves. But I think we're going to move towards a very decentralized system. We need to realize that there are psychopaths out there, and we want to minimize the risk, the damage they can do. So we want to have a more decentralized society. So there's no one hub somebody can take over and cause some same amount of damage or murder. And so that's certainly super duper important as one characteristic of a future society. I do think, I believe that we have to balance, the other thing how to balance, into protecting, as you're saying, protecting individual liberties is super important and having individual freedom. And that's really important, okay? And so we definitely, on the one hand, want to try and get that as far as we can. And then the other point is we want to also have a society where, it's not just, we don't want to just be a selfish society. I don't think that's a very inspiring. And I don't necessarily believe that ultimately, I don't really want to have a society where people both are protecting individual liberty and enough force to do things, but also they want to spend some of the time making a better place, and so I think, I'll just talk about the non-aggression principle. I think that's great. I think we need to enforce society, again, not by force of force. I think we want to move towards a voluntary, more and more voluntary society where things are not forced, because voluntary means more freedom. And so, like, if something's going bad and it's voluntary, you can just leave it and go somewhere else. So I think the problem is that people are so used to government, they can't wrap their hands around something different. But there could be different forms of government. There could be there could be no government. I think we should experiment and try to figure out what's happening. What's going to work. And I think it's possible for all sorts of things are possible. I think those ideas that you presented are, just limiting. We got to use our imaginations. We're godlike creatures. We can create new things, and we can imagine new things, and then we can co-create them, and then we can measure those and see what actually worked and what didn't work. And it's possible to have some people in some systems and some people in other systems, and have a way for them to interface. And I think I'd encourage people to open up their minds and not be so narrow. I think the idea of having some sort of a centralized hierarchy with elders, I'm against that. At this point in time, I think there's too many psychopaths. We want to minimize risk. So the key question to me, and then how you frame it, I think is really important. So obviously one of the forms that the things that the government does do is that would be positive is they help prevent people doing harm to others. If they're doing a good job, they would do that. So the goal, I think, for society is how do we figure out what is considered doing harm to others or not. That's tricky because sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it isn't. Not everything's black and white. Some things are and some aren't. And then we need to figure out a mechanism. So we have to have a mechanism to determine that, and then also a mechanism that that figures out how do we enforce for those people who do harm to others. How do we have a mechanism that gets the appropriate consequences? And I frame it that way because I want people to include other things than just government. So that's why I use the word mechanism. So I try to free people's minds up to the thinking of other possibilities. So we need a mechanism that does that cannot be corrupted or is very unlikely to corrupt it. Because the whole problem that we're living now is that we have this whole society around with this mechanism, but it's not working totally. It's not like it's totally not working, but there's so many things that are super wrong with it. So, for example, the financial elite are stealing money from people left and right. Not small amounts, like trillions of dollars. I follow the financial crime really closely, and if people are interested in that, check out like Zero Hedge or Max Kaiser. And it's crazy, all the financial manipulation. I think most people accept that as true, but those people are getting away with crazy stealing that's super unethical. We should not be passive around that. And so that's just an example where the people who the current mechanism isn't working at all. So I think I think that framing those conversations in that way, I think can help us think of better solutions. As I said, I think the blockchain can use technology, whether it's the Bitcoin blockchain or other technologies, might help us to create a better system, a more justice system. I think the internet is changing things in a huge, huge way. I think it's just a great example of how technology can really be a paradigm change. We wouldn't be having this conversation without the internet. I don't think as many people would be awake. Again, before the elites could just buy up all the media. I mean, and other people didn't have much. We have local access, radio or TV. It wasn't much. The internet's really allowing for more perspective. So it's an example of how technology allows us to organize in a different way. Okay, that's why we should never be set on this is the right way or wrong way. There's a great term from meditation that I think is really helpful. It's called to reify things. So I see the nature of life as impermanence. I think the Buddhists got that right, that things are constantly changing and evolving. And the problem why people get problem is they take ideas and they make them solid. They reify it. And that's what it means. To reify is to make something that's not solid, to make it actually solid, like an idea. Like if you say, well, we can only have society if there's government, you've reified that. That's whatever. I mean, things change. There are all sorts of possibilities. We don't want to reify anything. So if we want to get into a world of higher consciousness, not only one way to get away from this whole reifying thing here is this idea, it's called going from subject to object. And this is what this means, okay? Basically, people who are, people like take on an identity. I'm Christian, I believe in the right wing, and these are the things, not only do I believe in them, but they are me, that I am. So they've taken these concepts and they've made them the subject. So they've made these things so they can't talk about them without actually negative. They can't look at them critically without causing them personal pain because they are so over-identified with them or attached to them, and they've made them solid. They've made them truth. And so they're stuck. Okay, and this is happening with all sorts of topics, with all sorts of people everywhere on the planet. Okay, so this is super important to look at. So this idea is if you can not over-identify things to make subject objects. So what that's saying is to take all the things that you not really identify with them, you see them as possibilities, as things to look at, to consider, good and bad. Everything's got good and bad stuff about it. There's nothing that's like per se. So if individuals are able to take the things that they care about most and be able to get some distance to it, and then they can be more objective to it, and that facilitates learning, that facilitates growth, that facilitates change. And that's a pathway to a positive world. And so we need to get more people going through that to make the things that they're subject to make them more objective. And then that again, I mean, there are really cool things that people are doing out there. Here, I want to make your audience aware of something that I think is really cool. It's a system called Holacracy, and it's basically a flat system. This guy Brian Roberson designed it, and a lot of people are doing it, including like the Zappos is one of the bigger companies that do it. It's a really cool way. Instead of having a hierarchy, people don't actually have bosses. They basically have roles, and they're very clearly defined about what they need to do and who they need to communicate with, and they have these systems of communication. There's a lot to it, and I don't want to take up a ton of time on it, but I would just encourage people who are excited and open-minded about new ways to organize things. This is another idea that people should put on the plate and just take a look at, and just understand that there's unlimited ways of organizing. And it's just happening now, like the whole new media that you're a part of, like with the show. I mean, that's us creating a new world right now. We're experimenting, we're seeing what works, and it's happening.
Yeah, what you just said kind of reminds me of what I saw in the documentary Zeitgeist Moving Forward, where they talked about how we burn all the money and everything, and how they explained how we can go about starting anew and everything, and how society could work. However, one problem that seems to be a big flaw in the system in that movie that they suggested was that a record of everything that we need and use to fit our needs and wants is kept in some sort of a system to make it easy to determine how many people need and want what in society. And some say that's tantamount to the NSA surveillance system, which they can find a way to blackmail you in some way. So, do you share the same notion there that that would be a bad idea because we don't want another NSA surveillance system?
Yeah, so you're talking about like the Venus. I think, yeah, I'm familiar with the zeitgeist kind of stuff, and I believe what you're saying is that they are going from a perspective of there's limited resources on the planet, and we need to figure out what's on the planet and how do we, survive as a species. And they want to have it like in a centralized area and have computers doing that. I think that's what you're getting at. I don't know about that. It sounds risky. I'm against deep centralization. That's just one perspective. I think at the Free Your Mind conference, I think it was Bob Tuskin did a whole presentation about scarcity mindset versus abundance mindset. And I think that paradigm speaks to a scarcity mindset. The elites is, again, one of their strategies to keep them in power is to create the world, create people in fear, the whole climate change narrative that the whole world's going to end. It's all about fear. People should look into that. That look at different perspectives on that, honestly. And I do believe there are a lot of problems with the environment, but that research is shady, in my opinion. And that's again about scarcity. That's trying to push a whole agenda of control. If you look what's behind that, and so I'm not particularly in favor of the idea. I think we have to look at honestly about what the current state is, but also we have to realize that we're imaginative creatures and that we can innovate, we can create new solutions. So I think it's just looking at it from a scarcity perspective isn't the way to go. I mean, I do think that we should. I also don't believe that we should creating mechanisms that force people into something isn't going to create a better world. So I mean, to the extent that some of that stuff's true, we need to look at it and we need to consider all different perspectives on different things. The problem is right now is that there's not, at least in the mainstream, is the whole governance and the whole narrative that's all being controlled right now, and so I don't really trust what that whole narrative's going on about that, and so I think we should consider other perspectives. And again, anything it centralizes things for just a few people operating, controlling things is kind of a bad idea for all the reasons I mentioned before about psychopathology and leverage of centralization. So I'd be wary of any narratives that push us in that direction. I don't think that's the best solution. I think people, I know the media likes to portray us as, terrorists and people shooting people, but I don't know about you. I've traveled all over the world and I hang out with a lot of different people. Most people are nice and well-meaning. Sure, people are stuck on their different perspectives, but I think the portrayal of the media has on people is rubbish, in my opinion. It's trying to create a world of fear, and sure, there are some bad people out there, and again, we have to do some scenario planning, including bad people in power, which we need to look at. So I think my sense is if we could get a better flow of information and consider more perspectives, if there really was something like that was really dire for the planet, that I think people would rally behind it. But right now, there's like no trust in the way things are in the mainstream stuff. So I don't consider those narratives valid at this point in time. I haven't seen information that totally validates that.
Okay, the little thing. Some say this isn't a big deal. Others say no, it's a big deal. The whole issue of brainwashing people into accepting the ideology of a democracy over a republic. You hear in the media and the government all the time, they will not use the word republic. They will use the word democracy, and they'll sound like they care for everybody in the context of it. And then they use the word democracy instead of a republic. Well, anybody who understands how political systems work, democracy is two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner. In a republic, the sheep would have the ability to nullify the tyrannical decisions of the two wolves. And something as little as that, some people say using a word instead of a word is insignificant. Well, simply adding a few words it does not mean it's not going to be significant. You mentioned Mark Passo earlier. I remember he talked about once how Betty Crocker instant cakes, nobody bought it because the women didn't feel good about the idea of making instant cake. But when they added the words "add an egg" to the instructions, women started buying it like crazy, and the cakes became a lot more popular simply because the instructions said to add an egg, so it's not instant anymore. And of course, the fact that
Hmm.
the egg symbolizes feminism is no accident there. So similarly, by the same token, the politicians and the media would use the word democracy instead of republic to sucker people into accepting a tools and cheap deciding what's their dinner mentality. Do you see this as a big deal, or do you think that people really, really need to become aware of the fact that when they say we want a democracy or use the word democracy in politics or the media, they're obviously doing it for tyrannical purposes?
Yeah, great question. So let's like look at the current state. I mean, the way the way that the elites kind of have it is that they, by controlling the flow of information and getting people using the education system to buy into authority, they realize that they have a way to co-opt the system so that they, especially with their ability to have an insane amount of money and maybe like the financial system, they have levers to control. They can either influence what people are thinking by the media, and also by, again, education, and then also unfortunately, in the current state, a lot of people are so overwhelmed with just trying to make ends meet, trying to make a living, or deal with their family or their job pressures. They don't have time to research all this stuff that you and I have allowed ourselves to get into. So they have created democracy, so that's what I think people described as democracy as tyranny of the majority, which is, I think, true. It just means that whatever the most people think gets. So I don't think that's right. I don't know if that's the best way to organize society. I mean, I think the people, like you were talking about elders, the people with the higher consciousness are few in number. And I don't think a few people should tell people what to do. I don't know if we want to go to the meaning of the society deciding, and then those people are being manipulated, again, through wealthy people, through media, and education systems being controlled. So I don't know. I think that the democracy system, as you're kind of pointing out, is a system that's not optimizing for humanity to grow and evolve. And the republic is good. I think not enough people have done the research to understand the republic is more about like having a few protecting rights, and I don't think we're supposed to be in a democracy. We're supposed to be actually in a representative democracy. But I mean, this really kind of comes back to this system that we're talking about is all super centralized, and I think that we want to. I think if you want to, we want all both a democracy and a republic end up being very top-down systems, because it sounds bottoms up, but it's so easy in the current state to manipulate most people by the top people. They have a lot of leverage with the money, the way the money system is, and System United. We have a very top-down society, and there's no reason that we all have to, like, if we want to have a true bottoms-up society, then you want to have where the people are really making better decisions. You're going to want to have people actually involved in it. So that's why I would advocate to organizing around the centers of powers are more local, like get more people involved locally, and so they can have more say and they're immediate. I don't think we need like these overarching, that everybody's got to do the same thing. We got to respect people's individuality and where they're at, and it's too dangerous to have this big centralized system. It's just causing too much problems at this point in society. We don't have a way of recognizing and easily controlling these psychopaths, and based on where the current state is, I'm against. I would definitely make things smaller, so we can wait until we have our handle on how to deal with all these psychopaths, why they exist. We don't want to give them opportunities to cause major damage.
Damn straight. And in regards to, well, just, first of all, I want to point out there's 6 minutes left on the live feed. If you want to go a little past 8 to finish a thought or something, that's fine. It's just that people have to call into the show 646-478-4747 if they want to listen to that. But let's try to keep this to 2 hours. And I'd like to finish
Okay.
off on the idea of hope for humanity being positive. You said earlier in the interview you see a positive future, and as far from what I've seen too, there's no reason to think there isn't a positive future in store. I mean, for one, Akashic Records reader Andrew Bartzis has said that since 2011, the Archon control system has been cannibalizing itself, and it's not going to stop cannibalizing itself until it's gone. So that can only mean that over the course of time, things are going to get better, and whenever things get worse because of like what just happened in Paris, for example, that's nothing more than the Archon control system and the powers that be getting desperate and doing like a last hurrah, battle of the bulge kind of thing in order to keep power. When in reality, it's unavoidable that it will fail. Not to mention that George Kavasilis told me in my interview with him that the reason he has said before that the New World Order can never fulfill its goal of global totalitarian government is because Mother Earth, at its heart soul essence, is a love-based entity, and love-based entities would never allow for evil forces like the New World Order, no matter how tyrannical it may try to get, to succeed in its goal of global totalitarian government. Like Jordan Maxwell, on the other hand, he's taken a pessimistic view. He's often said humans are too stupid, fearful, and will run away in terror, even though they outnumber their enemy and all that. But but he has said, I will say though, there's hope for humanity if we get help from higher entities, higher benevolent entities. So, and we are, as the evidence shows. But I'm not going to get into that. So, what do you think about this? I want to know what you think. Hope for humanity. Why do you? The specific reasons. Can you sum up in maybe 4 minutes why you see a positive future?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. Okay, so I agree that the elite system, I talked about this earlier in the interview, so I'm not going to dwell on that, is becoming more and more tyrannical, as we discussed, and it's getting more obvious. So that gets to your idea, what you talk about, cannibalizing itself, and that's causing more and more people to wait. This is what I talked about before, about they're creating the metaphysics for people to change, okay? So I think the future is undetermined. I don't see. I think it could go in many different ways. It's up to us. Okay, it's up to us. It's up to us. It's up to us. So I think they're creating the conditions to create a better world by making it worse. And I think that we should take this on. We should be like, whoa, this is enough. I feel like a lucky duck, man. We get to like live through this amazing time period where we could possibly create like a whole different paradigm. I don't think this was really possible pre-internet where there's knowledge sharing, and I would encourage people to embrace this. Is nothing is given, okay? Nothing is given. It's up to you. It's up to you. It's up to you, and it's all about small steps. Don't get all caught up in all the big things, the big fear porn, all the big obstacles. It's about what you do each day, and you matter, man. Model in the way, man. Each day you make yourself a little better. You figure out what your role is in this huge change. You could make a difference. You could, be part of. You could sit there and watch TV and be distracted, entertained, or you can be part of something exciting. I don't know this. I talk about this. I light up inside, and this is really exciting times. And so I would encourage people to think about the things that I've been talking about. Like look at themselves. What's going on with them currently? Who do they really want to be? Who is their ideal spiritual self? What are the baby steps that you as an individual need to do to be that higher person? Okay, because it all starts with you and is the individual. Okay, and then we come together and we talk about things. We experiment with new things. Not everything's going to work. This is a process. It's a process, big time. And there's going to be stumbling blocks. Some people, there's going to be suffering. It's not all going to be candy and cake or whatever. It's going to be a process of ups and downs. But be resilient. Be confident, and look into meditation. That can really help you. And I tell you, that's made a huge difference in my life. Healthy. That's what you do every day. I encourage people to get their energy up. Exercise, get around with people that are like-minded, positive attitudes, and really want to do something. And we'll find each other. It's happening. It's happening on the internet. It's happening on a local level. You could get local groups going. There's all sorts of things, unlimited things you can do. There's so many problems, but there's so many of us to solution. And I think this message the time is now to get this kind of message out there and really fully embody it. I think that the part of figuring out what was going on with these dark unveilings, that part's kind of coming to an end. We will, enough of us know what's going on, and we're going to make it easier for other people to figure it out, and we're going to carry the torch, and we're going to build something more positive. It's going to take time. It's going to be patience and persistence, and I don't know. I believe in humanity, and I'm going to be fighting to my last dying breath, and I'm excited about it.
I'm excited too, and I'm gonna also ride this horse till it falls down dead. But speaking of almost falling down dead, this show's about to come to an end. In regards to the live feed, it'll be off in 10 seconds. But anyway, I'd like to finish off by the show by telling you, John, the same thing I tell all of my guests, and that is that you are indeed a fascinating individual. You have very valuable information to share, and I have no doubt that I could have you on another show to discuss whole new things if I wanted to. But the fact is, John, one of my goals with this show that I've always had with this show is to try to get as many different people on my show as possible before I give any one specific guest double dips, because I feel that that is the fairest, most impartial, and most informative way to do a nature of reality seeking radio show. So that does mean, I regret to say, John, I probably won't be asking you to come on my show again, but that's only because I need to give thousands of other fascinating individuals the chance to have some glory on my show. But I will spread this interview far and wide. I will make your name a lot more well known. Among other things, I'll upload this interview to YouTube. So hopefully that will cause an increase in the modelingtheway.com visitors view count and such. And I'll do whatever I can to spread this on social media networks as well. I loved having you on. You gave a whole new perspective to looking at change and how to do it. And I do wish you the best of luck for the future. And maybe I'll see you at a future conference.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Charles, for listening. I really appreciate you having a platform for being on your show, and I appreciate the work you're doing with spreading different perspectives. I think that's really important. Diversity of perspectives helps us learn and grow, and you're definitely providing it by the way you're doing your show. So keep up the great work, and I look forward to connecting you at a future conference.
Hey, same here. All right, take care, John. I'm off today.
See you later, Andrew. Okay, bye.
Folks, that is the end of this show, and next week I will be having Tara Goldenberg on my show. I believe she was also another person I met at the Free Your Mind conference, got her card, and I wanted to contact her just like everybody else at that conference, like every conference I go to. So Tara Goldenberg will be the guest on the show next week. So without further ado, this is Andrew Fisher saying namaste, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your trek throughout infinite consciousness.